So what we're going to talk about today is the first 20 Africans that came into the Virginia colony in 1619 and the status of the descendants afterwards. Now, what we have to understand is that Virginia at this time is having a lot of turmoil in their colony, right? A lot of things are not squared away. They're not established at this time, and so they're trying to figure things out. And one of the things they're also figuring out is the status of the Africans who are coming in and what will be their role. And so what we eventually come to find out is that as the dust settles, they had a specific role for the Africans, and that's what we'll find out in this video. And so what I want to do is go into this book here. It's called Race in North America: The Origin and Evolution of a Worldview. Now the title here is already chunky. It already has a lot of things that could be digested just within this title: the origin and evolution of a worldview, the way that people begin to see the world. And so this book is written by Dr. Audrey Smedley and her son Brian Smedley. And to me, Dr. Audrey Smedley, she is the grand master when it comes to race, as far as breaking it down and just understanding the way that it works and it functions. She's the one to go to. So when you want to understand race, I highly recommend her book. And so we'll go in here to page 96 and see if we can get some understanding about these first Africans, these first 20 that came to the colony, and then what happened afterwards.
Africans were first introduced into the English colony at Jamestown in 1619. They were part of a cargo of people sold from a Dutch ship that had been trading along the Virginia coast. The little Jamestown colony thus found itself the beneficiary of a new group of laborers for which its settlers had no previous preparation or experience.
Because at this time, the colony is relying on other European servants to do the work. So Africans coming into this colony at this time is something new that they were not all the way prepared for.
In the New England colonies, a few African servants were introduced as early as 1633. They were in Connecticut by 1639 and in New Haven by 1644. In none of these areas were the numbers initially very large. For the rest of that century, a steady stream of Africans was brought to the mainland colonies, particularly after the development of the tobacco industry.
And the development of the tobacco industry, this is going to be one of the causes that creates the demand for having Africans come into the colony.
In 1670, Virginia still relied for most of its laborers and servants on imports from England.
Most of the laborers at this time were European. That's who they were using as servants. Because you have to understand, the rulers and the ruling class, to be honest, they don't care what any skin color or anything is. If they can get away with it, they'll get away with it. At this time, they're using Europeans to do the work. So let's go right here into this book by Dr. Jacqueline Batalora, and let's get some more information. Let me see what page it is. I think it's on page 16. Let's get some more information about these Europeans that were being brought over before the Africans were being used over in the Virginia colony.
Between 1607 and 1682, roughly 92,000 immigrants from Europe were transported to North America, mostly to the Virginia colony, but also to Maryland, and more than 3/4 of these immigrants, more than 69,000, were chattel bond laborers, people who were unfree for a term of years.
So we see here that 69,000 Europeans came over to the Virginia colony to be used as indentured servants or bond laborers. And they served their term for a certain period of time, and then after that they were supposed to be let free. So at this time, it's unnecessary to have the African laborers in large amounts. It doesn't come into importance until, as we're going to keep reading, until a little bit later, like I said, with the start of the tobacco industry developing, right? So that's going into that. So let's put this book down and let's go back into the Audrey Smedley book, Race in North America, and let's go back and finish where we were at.
Sugar plantations requiring massive labor had developed in the West Indian Islands after about 1640, and the number of Africans imported there increased rapidly from mid-century on.
So in the Virginia colonies, we have the tobacco industry developing. In the West Indies, we have the sugar plantation. With the sugar plantation developing, now we need to find people to work this land. So over there in Africa, there's already a source of laborers. They're already selling people as slaves, so they go over there and they start trading with those people, bringing people over to work the land.
The French, the Spanish, the Dutch, and the English were busily establishing plantations in the Caribbean islands, while competing and fighting among themselves. Those who were successful came increasingly to rely on African slave labor.
Why? Because the Africans were already more skilled in doing this type of work. They were also more fitting for the environment. They were already accustomed. The Europeans weren't accustomed to this type of environment. You got to remember, it's more humid, it's more hot in those in the West Indies and in certain areas in the South. And over there in those coastal areas in Africa, it's the climate is similar. So they can bring them over, and they're already skilled working in those environments. So obviously, it's going to be more beneficial to use the African labor than the European labor. And also on top of that, they're also cheaper. And you can also do one more other thing: use them as perpetual slaves.
A key issue that has prompted much debate and speculation among contemporary historians has been the precise status of these Africans in North America before the institutionalization of laws creating permanent slavery.
So before the laws were stamped down in the books of making the Africans permanent slaves, the debate is like, what was the role and what was the status prior to that? Some historians say that they came in and they were already slotted for those roles before it got hammered into the books. Others, like her in here, Dr. Batelor, she talks about it in this book. She talks about how many of the Africans were able to marry the European women, and a lot of them did marry each other. A lot of the times, the Africans were able to own property. They also were able to vote. So there's a lot of these other muddied areas where it's not as clear, and there's not a lot of firsthand evidence on what the real status of the Africans were at that time. So it's kind of, there's evidence for both.
Some historians have suggested that the Africans were slotted into already existing roles as servants, working for the normal period of debenture from 4 to 7 years.
So this is what we're talking about. So some historians are going to say that the Africans came in and the intention was to have them work like the indentured servants, the European ones. And there is evidence to support that on some cases, like we said. Some of those Africans were able to buy land, and they also owned other Africans, right? They owned slaves as well.
The term slave was rarely applied to these Africans during the first decades of their presence in North America. At the same time, historians have noted that varying degrees of servitude were recognized by the English, although the distinctions between them were not very precise. On this point, David Breon Davis observes, not only did slavery and serfdom coexist and overlap, but medieval jurists tended to confuse the two conditions. Jordan claims that there was a measure of precision in the English concept of slave, but that it has not been well analyzed. He argues that for most Englishmen, slavery denoted a complete loss of freedom, akin to the loss of one's humanity, and to treat a man as a slave was to treat him as a beast.
So we see that the English have at least two concepts of what it means to be a slave. One of them is an indentured servant, work for a certain amount of time, you can get your freedom. The other one is an actual slave, in their mind, which means someone who doesn't have any freedom.
That some ordinary European servants were sometimes called slaves may reflect not only the confusion of the two categories, but most likely the subjective feelings of those who held positions as owners and masters. Perhaps the best exploration of this issue is the work of Theodore Allen. With meticulous detail, he has examined the primary sources from the earliest records of the Virginia colony through the 17th century and early 18th centuries. He has concluded that the status of the first Africans was indeterminate because it was being fought out.
Now she's talking about Theodore Allen right here. This is the book, The Invention of the White Race. This is a 2-volume book right here. Now this book right here is heavy. This is going into the primary records and showing exactly how the concept of race was constructed, and it's giving some background on the events that took place in order for the concept to become realized and why it was put in place. So this is a heavy book, right? Highly recommended. It's a tough read in some senses, but it's really good when you can break through it. So in here we're going to page 178 and find out about this, what she's referring to about this undetermined status of the Africans at this time, because this is where she's pulling from.
I would propose to dissolve this aspect of the debate over the origin of racial slavery by recognizing that the historical records of 17th century Virginia compel the conclusion that the relative social status of African Americans and European Americans in that volatile society can be determined to have been indeterminate.
So Theodore Allen is saying that it can't be determined exactly what the actual status was of everyone in that society. There's a lot of things happening in Virginia at this time. They don't have their head straight, and they're trying to figure things out. They're trying to see if they can survive at this time. Can they bring their head above water and make it?
It was indeterminate because it was being fought out. Fought out in the context of the great social stresses of high mortality.
So when it's saying that it's fought out, that means they're struggling. They're fighting out, and one of the things that they're fighting against is high mortality. A lot of people dying, disease, famine. Food is not plentiful at this time. Like I said, they're fighting to see if they're going to sink or swim in this colony. So high mortality is one of the things that they're dealing with in the Jamestown Colony at this time.
The vicissitudes of a monocultural economy, impoverishment,
like we said, a lot of people are poor at this time, especially the people that came over. We read about those that 69,000 that came over to become bond laborers. Those are going to be the main people that are poor. Obviously, the elites, they're taken care of, fat and belly hanging out. But the other people are becoming impoverished. So a lot of turmoil is happening. What else?
And an extremely high sex ratio, all of which were based on or derived from the abnormal system of chattel bond servitude.
High sex ratio, very little women in the colony, a whole bunch of men. Turmoil, confusion, all types of stuff happening at this time. So that's why the status of everyone is indeterminate. You can't really put the pieces together on who is who. What is what? Is everyone all equal? Or some people, is there a hierarchy set up? Is it established yet? It's indeterminate on what's really going on with the information that we currently have.
The critical moment of the social struggle arrived with Bacon's Rebellion of 1676, which posed the question of who should rule. The answer, which would be contrived over the next several decades, would not only determine the status of African Americans, but would install the monorail of Anglo-American historical development, white supremacy.
So over the next several decades, this is when they begin to put the laws in place, which created the necessary environment and conditions for the Africans to become permanent slaves and the Europeans to rise above their servitude and to become free people. Right? This is the context behind it. These are the answers on who should rule and how they should rule. And these are set up by the European ruling class to do this. Okay, so we got that here. Let's go back into the other book, Race in North America, right? Dr. Audrey Smedley, and get some more of this fire.
What is indisputably clear is that beginning in the latter part of the 17th century, major social and economic transformations began to take place that eventually obliterated the uncertain status of Africans and their descendants.
Social and economic transformations. The social status, they introduced the term white and created race, which created the divide, and it created a hierarchy, which black people are on the bottom. And they put white people at the top. And they created and forged this hierarchy as a worldview to where other people look through that lens, and when they look out at the world, they see that too. That's the social change. The economic change is the slave trade, right? The tobacco market, the sugar plantations, all these things are booming. We need people to work the fields. Who do we go get that? Go to that supply. You go to the Africans. It's a perfect system that begins to work for those ruling class elite. It has a system that meets all their needs with the race and also the slavery.
Through the passage of various laws, Negroes were separated out from other servants and gradually reduced to the status of permanent hereditary slavery.
It says through the passage of various laws. You got to understand what laws are intended to do. Laws are intended to direct the thinking and the behavior of people. So when you put laws in place and you say, if someone does this and there's a punishment behind it, it's meant to deter the action of that person. If you go out and steal, you know you're going to go to jail, right? If you go out and kill someone, you know you might get the death penalty. It's meant to deter it. And when it's in law, that means it can be enforced. So they use the laws. When their laws are on the books and everyone agrees to it, this is what is going to be enforced. So they created certain laws and set those up. One of them was that the blacks and the Europeans were no longer allowed to marry, which means that before that, that's what they were doing. You put the law in place and it stops people from doing it to a large extent. And when you catch people doing it, you can punish them. And when other people see the punishment, they're supposed to look at it like, we shouldn't do that because we're going to get what he got or she got. Let's read this again.
Through the passage of various laws, Negroes were separated out from other servants and gradually reduced to the status of permanent hereditary slavery.
Negroes were separated out. They pulled them out of there because they had their eyes set on Negroes. The elite did. They separated them out using the laws. If I keep taking all your rights away from you with laws, you don't have anything left. That means it creates a polarity with the people who do have rights and the ones who don't have rights. Where the people who have rights eventually get to look at you like, dang, you must not be a human because you don't have any rights. And the people who don't have rights look at the people who have all the rights and say, dang, you must be a human because you have all the rights. It gradually reduced the Negro into a perpetual slave. That's what the intention was. And he talks about it in here, that this was not by accident. They knew exactly what they were doing, right? And you follow the laws and you can see how they're systematically doing it, systematically creating it, the laws. By default, the people who, the children of the Europeans and those that were enslaved, they grow up under those laws and they begin to see that worldview. That's why it's the origin and evolution of a worldview. They begin to see it from that worldview. Right? Let's keep going.
A date frequently noted by historians to mark the first official recognition of permanent slave status in law is 1661, when the Virginia Assembly passed an act making a servant who ran away with a Negro responsible for serving the time of the Negro slave.
So this one is another law. If we catch you running away with a Negro, you're going to end up serving that time too. What does that do? It shapes the behavior of the Europeans, meaning you better not get caught with that Negro or you're fried. So what does that do? Okay, the person is going to be less likely to go and try to do any uprisings with the Negro. They got cast away out into the pit. Right? This is serious stuff. Serious stuff going into the making of the mindset of Negro and black people.
However, North American slavery was not the result of a single law or a single court decision, but of numerous individual acts, decisions, and practices that over time became codified into the legal framework of colonial society.
A numerous amount of laws. They didn't just do one of them. He talks about it in here. The invention of the white race, Theodore Allen. He goes into the laws, right? And also in here too. Dr. Jacqueline Bateleur, she goes into the laws too. The laws that show how they are constructing an environment, the elite Europeans are constructing an environment to create conditions to make permanent slaves, to make you feel inferior and to make the people see themselves as a reduced human and to make other people also see them as reduced humans as well. They did more than this. I mean, when we go into it even more into other cases, this was just one thing, the law. There's other things that they also used as well, propaganda and other things. They were really trying, they threw the full book at black people. The full book. Any and every trick underneath the sea, they found it and they threw it. Because they're trying to do what? Create a permanent slave.
These changes continued into the early 18th century, and in the process produced a system of bondage that was unique in human history. Its primary distinctiveness rested on the fact that such slavery was reserved exclusively for black Africans and their descendants.
That's who it was made for. Black Africans and their descendants. They created the name black and they gave it to those people, and they created a system to oppress and to keep them as permanent slaves. It's important to understand this because now it gives more context into why, and this is more so, it really was amplified in the United States. The other areas didn't really get the same like heavy tossing into the pit like the United States did. So there's a lot more pit that needs to be climbed up out of when you understand this. And it gives some context onto why black people in the most prosperous country that has ever existed are doing how they're doing.
This was a critical step in the evolution of the social construction of race.
Made up by humans and eventually accepted by humans at that time and still accepted by the humans of today. Not understanding that that same system, the worldview, is still set up and covered over the eyes. And if someone is classified as a black person, you would think that they would have every incentive to want to learn this information. And not only to learn it, but to climb themselves out of the pit that has been dug, right, by the people who invented the white race and also by the people who invented the black race. Because I can assure you that they didn't have any of your best interest in mind. Whose interest did they have in mind? Themselves, right? So this is very important. And this gives us some insight on the first 20 Africans that came into the Virginia colony, and eventually, after their arrival, what took place afterwards. So my name is Brooklyn St. Michael, and I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you on the next one.